and Creer Rowe, my mother, was born in Salt Lake City, March 31, 1857. Her father, Edward Creer, was born November 3, 1813 in Bolton, Lancashire, England. Her mother, Anne Morris Creer, was born December 27, 1814 in Chesley, Lancashire, England. They were married in Preston in the year 1855. Matthews Creer, my mother's grandfather, was born at White of Cumberland Co. October 15, 1790. Matthews's father was John Creer. The family came from the Isle of Man and settled in Whitehaven. From Whitehaven they moved to Preston. Edward and Anne Morris Creer were the parents of 12 children. Of these, 6 were born in England and 6 in America. The eldest daughter, Ellen, died in England at the age of 8 years, and 3, Ellen, Anne, Robert, and Sarah Letts, died in infancy in St. Louis and Salt Lake City. Mother's parents were among the first to embrace the doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the British Mission and were baptized in 1838. The following certificate of Anne Morris Creer, my mother's mother, has been preserved and is worthy of record as being among the first certificates issued in the British Mission. We do hereby certify that Anne Morris Creer, the bearer of this, is a regular member and in good standing and fellowship in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Preston, and is a worthy member of the same, and as a token of our love and goodwill, we give unto her this recommendation to the fellowship and esteem of the saints in any land or country to which she may be pleased to remove. Signed, Heber C. Kimball, Orson Hyde, presiding elders of said church. March 12, 1838. In 1847, Edward, together with his mother, 4 sisters, his wife, and 6 children, emigrated to America on the ship Charlotte, arriving in St. Louis, Missouri, in December of that year, having been on the ocean for 11 weeks. There were 150 saints in the company. While living in St. Louis, Edward's mother, Nellie Greenhalgh, sister Phoebe, and 2 children, Ellen and Robert, died. Alice and Edward Jr. were born in St. Louis at this time. After remaining in St. Louis for 7 years, the Creer family left for Utah May 1, 1854, traveling with ox teams. There were 25 wagons in the company under Captain Joseph Fields. There were 5 months and 3 days traveling from St. Louis to Salt Lake, arriving a few days before October conference. On March 31, 1857, at Salt Lake City was born to Edward and Anne Morris Creer, their youngest child, Anne Creer, my mother. At this time she had 4 brothers and 3 sisters living: William, Mary, Orson, Jane, Matthews, Alice, and Edward. In January 1856, William and his sister, Mary, moved to Spanish Fork upon the request of William's friend, Joseph Howell, who proffered to give him employment, for which he received food. At that time, 1856, William built what became the first Creer home, a dugout constructed on the corner of 1st East and 6th North. He also filed claim to farmland on what is not the village of Palmyra. 2 years later, in 1858, the remainder of the family moved to Spanish Fork in conformity with the plan of Brigham Young, known as the Move South, to thwart the purpose of Johnson's army. The marriage of the brother William and sister Mary, the employment of Orson by Willard Banks, averted much of the congestion of the well-occupied dugout. This dugout served as a home for several years for my mother, her parents, brothers Matthews, Edward, and sisters Alice and Jane. It was replaced by a 2-room adobe house. The father, Edward, made by hand, the son baked adobes. The mud roof was later replaced by shingles made by Archibald Gardner. It was considered a very elegant home in those days and was the home in which the family grew up. My mother's schooling was very limited, a few weeks each year in crude schoolrooms and with few books. However, she was a good reader and provided the home with good reading material. She married Owen Rowe, my father, in 1875. To them were born 15 children, 7 boys and 8 girls: Annie, Eleanor, Nellie, Owen, Edward, John, Mary, Alice, Lenora, Grace, Genevieve, Jennie, Lily, Dale, Louis, Ross, and Roy twins, and Leah's stillborn baby. Owen, the first son, died in infancy. Lily Dale at the age of 10, Mary Alice at the age of 17 of spinal meningitis, Roy, the twin, a few months old, and Lee at birth. The remaining 10 children grew to manhood and womanhood, were married, and all had families. Although her children came fast, she managed to take part in the church and community activities. She and father were members of the Spanish Fork Choir when it was led by William R. Jones. There are many pictures of this group in the homes of Spanish Fork. One adorned the walls of our living room for years. Mother was an officer in Relief Society and served as a visiting teacher for many years. As a child, I remember when she made these visits, she carried a basket on her arm in which they put whatever was given by the sisters visited, which consisted of bars of soap, spools of thread, yard material, or butter, or anything that could be used for the poor and needy. This custom has been replaced by the church's wonderful welfare plan and the taking of gospel messages into the homes visited. For 13 years, her obituary said 18 years she was president of the Third Ward Primary Association. I was older then and not a member of the primary, but I can remember how faithfully she performed her duty. Many of the most outstanding programs were put on by the Primary Association. Being a good seamstress, her great contributions to these programs was the making of costumes and overseeing the stage building and stage properties, curtains, etc. Much of this entertainment was done to obtain money to finance the organization. This money raising has been replaced now by the ward budget plan. There were no automobiles at this time, so the journey to attend stake leadership or union meetings was made by buggy and horse. In the coldest of weather, I remember seeing her heat rocks in the oven to put in the buggy to keep their feet warm. Mother's services were so often requested in homes where there was sickness or to help lay out the dead. There were no mortuaries and bodies were taken care of in the home. Burial clothes had to be made and she was called on to help the Relief Society sisters in sewing burial clothes. The early and later homes of my parents, Owen and Anne, have been mentioned in detail in the sketch of my father's life, so I will not duplicate it here. I shall confine my writing to our home life. Since I have had the responsibility of helping to raise a family, I appreciate the tremendous responsibility my mother assumed, especially since my father was gone from home so much. She not only had to care for the home, feed and clothe, and care for the children, but she had to be the disciplinarian and manager of the finances. Personally, I think that, without the help of my father, she proved herself most capable. She instilled thrift and industry into her family. During summer vacations, the younger boys, who didn't have employment with the farms, were given the responsibility of caring for the big garden which supplied our table with all necessary vegetables. The girls tore and sewed carpet bags, pieced quilts, and cut and dried the surplus fruit from the apricot and apple trees which grew on the lot. The rags were woven into carpets by an Iceland weaver. Carpet covered every room. The fruit was dried on the roof of the old log house, which stood behind the adobe house, which still stands. White factory was spread on the roof. The cut fruit was spread on this, then it was covered with mosquito bar cloth to prevent flies from getting on it. This dried fruit was then sold to the mercantile store. The money received was used to buy material, calico or gingham or bleach, which mother used to make our school clothes. One of the vivid recollections of my childhood is the special preparation mother made for the Sabbath day. The house had to clean with special care. Each girl was given a certain assignment. Mine was to clean the knife and fork drawer of the cupboard. The knives and forks were removed and scoured with fine ashes and returned to the drawer, which had been scrubbed and dried carefully. Saturday evening found the copper wash boiler on the stove filled with hot water to be used for the weekly baths of the younger children. The round tub was brought in and placed before the kitchen stove, and each had his turn. Clean Sunday clothes were always ready. Each of us was the proud owner of one pair of shoes, and for Sunday meetings they had to be shined as never before. Mother was an expert in the use of the long curved-handled shoe brush, which had a small dauber of bristles on the opposite side. This dauber was dipped into vinegar, then touched lightly to the soot that clung in black flakes from the back lids of the coal stove, and then applied it to the shoe. With swift strokes of the brush, the shoes were made to shine like glass. As the older children grew up and began earning money, we younger children were well provided for. My sister Nellie was so mindful of the needs of the younger children and provided material for our dresses and good-looking shoes. Annie, my sister, was very artistic in designing and making hats for myself and young sister Lily Dale. House cleaning time was another of my vivid recollections. One room at a time was cleaned. Beds were taken down. All furniture was removed. Carpets were taken up, and the old straw, which was used for padding under the carpet, was removed. Walls, woodwork, windows, and floors thoroughly cleaned, and the carpets were thrown over the clothesline, and the dust was beaten out of them. New straw replaced the old, and the carpets were then put down, stretched to the walls, and tacked to the floor. The stretched lace curtains were hung, furniture replaced. The beds were provided with straw ticks for mattresses. New straw had to be put in the ticks at each house cleaning time. Christmas Day and the 4th of July and the 24th of July were the most memorable days of my childhood. Mother made each of us a new outfit to wear for special occasions such as primary and Sunday school dances and programs at Christmas time. The 4th of July began with a salute at sunrise of 13 cannons. There was no lying in bed after this. All the children were anxious to put on their new dresses which mother had so beautifully made. Being the youngest of the girls, I wondered when my dress would be made and what it would be made of. But when the morning came, it was ready for me, made of remnants of other girls' dresses. Members of the family who were away always came home. The band would come to our gate and serenade my father. On Christmas, the family again were together to eat Christmas dinner. I fancy I can smell mother's plum pudding, which wrapped in a cloth and steamed until done. The early part of the evening was the children's and grandchildren's time. Santa Claus came and distributed gifts, after which a program was presented. I remember so distinctly Laura Beck's reciting Santa and the Mouse, Rulon Morgan, which loved best, or I love you mother, said little John, etc. A duet of Annie and Nellie, bass solo by John Asleep in the Deep, songs by the whole family with the 4 parts. Duets by Nora and myself, and duets by Laru and Dale Beck. The favorite being the sleighing song Jing Jing a Ling, etc. And the favorite Christmas carols Away in the Manger. Later in the evening the older ones went to the dance. I write about these occasions to show my mother's efficiency in preparing and managing such events. I think of mother as firm but kind. She ruled with an iron hand and a velvet glove. Her punishments were not severe, a few strokes with a little tingly switch occasionally. While she found joy and happiness in the successes of her family and in the services she rendered, her life was not always easy. There were also sorrows, conflicts, worries, pains. She, with father, shared the joy of seeing 2 sons fulfilling honorable missions for the church. Before Ed's departure for his mission, they, with their 10 living children, went to the Salt Lake Temple, where they received their endowments and had all the living children and those who had passed away sealed to them. It was a wonderful and beautiful sight to see such a group kneel at the altar and have this ordinance performed. Mother was much interested in the political issues of the day and took part in the early women's political organizations. She kept up with the current events. She was a charter member of the Daughter of the Utah Pioneers. No sacrifice was too great for her in order that her children might have an education. Her many trips by horse and buggy to carry supplies to girls who were attending the BYU at Provo were long and tiresome and fraught with some danger, a too frisky horse or the breaking down of some parts of the old buggy. She lived to celebrate her 80th birthday, at which time all the children came to celebrate it in Spanish Fork at the home of Annie and Morgan Beck. She passed away February 9, 1938 at her daughter Annie's home and was buried in the Spanish Fork Cemetery. Until she had her stroke, her later years were occupied with crocheting, tatting, making quilts, and braiding rugs. In memory, I shall always see those busy hands. As I touched them for the last time, I thought that in them God placed his most beautiful tool, service.